Welcome back to ISA Insider News, everybody. My name is Max Tim.
And I am Shayna Weber. And the top headline this week of April 4th is basically teens rule the world. And we say this because there are two interesting topics that came up this past week that we want to talk about.
Yeah, they pretty much rule the world. They kind of always have. I feel like since the 80s.
Dad, stand up for me.
I don't know, some change, John Hughes changed a lot in terms of really portraying, much more of a true nature of teenagers on film. But that audience has always been so huge. And then I think it's all, not that this is in the two articles that we found, this is just kind of popping in my head in the moment, but like merchandising, the 80s just completely changed this as far as those blockbuster movies, selling things, little things in McDonald's and the Happy Meals and all this crap, video games, So since then, and that's a nice little segue as far as this teenagers rule the world idea. The top headline that we chose, we're going a little, out on a limb here because there are, of course, a lot of things that have happened in the past week. We're still reeling about the slap heard around the world. We're going to move on from that as best we can. But top news for us this week, Fortnite, the video game, raises $144 million for Ukraine relief in a 2-week campaign.
Amazing.
When I read that, I just thought, wait a minute, there's so much to dial into when reading that headline. Just to get into it a little bit, this is from deadline.com. We love Deadline. A fundraising effort by video game Fortnite and Microsoft's Xbox has generated $144 million for organizations seeking to help Ukraine 6 weeks after an invasion. They talk about just everything that's going on. The funds that were raised are going to go to direct relief, the United Nations Children's Fund, the United Nations World Food Program, and the United Nations Refugee Agency. So not only is that really, actually, we could probably use that for our good news, but it's just incredible. It's so. What can really be said here, Shayna, about what this technically means in connection with our teenagers rule the world?
Well, from my standpoint, there's a lot of back and forth about video games, whether they're good for your teen, whether they're not. I know that, there's a lot of shooter games, which I don't particularly love. Video games are everywhere. But I think Fortnite is one of those where it's very interactive and you're very involved and very invested in it. So I think in a way, what it does on a positive side, aside from, your teen playing video games or your kid playing video games, is that it shows them, hey, there's another side of this that goes to something good. And I think that there's an awareness that's beginning. And I think that we underestimate our kids and our teenagers in awareness of the world. I think that they know a lot more than we assume that they think, and that they're a lot more exposed than we think that they are. So this is a very positive version of that exposure, I think.
Just to go a little bit back to the article here. So Epic Games is the manufacturer alongside Microsoft. They had previously announced it would redirect all proceeds from the game. And we'll explain this to all of you watching this who like, what's Fortnite and how can you make money ongoing other than just purchasing the game? You're in for a whole new world here if you don't know how it goes. But they're going to redirect all proceeds from the game along with Microsoft's to Ukrainian relief efforts for a period of 2 weeks. So the first day alone, when they opened this up in terms of all proceeds from the game, brought in $36 million, fueled by the release of a new version, which is even bigger. And they're constantly updating Fortnite. That's always a major event. So what Fortnite is, for those of you who may not know, for the lack of a better way of saying it, an in-game purchasable type of video game. You can play it for free if you want, but to truly experience and then upgrade and become, a so-called master. I don't know what the titles are necessarily. I've played it a few times and it's not fair because I end up playing 12-year-olds and it's like, forget this. they're way too good. But you play as a team and it's really kind of amazing, but there are in-game purchases. So it's an ongoing profit center. And a lot of these games are turning into this, where you enter a whole world and you're living in it and you're, fighting these weird zombies and having missions and blah, blah, blah. It's actually a ton of fun. Kids love it. But what this says is how many kids are playing this game and spending money on it, which is
right.
If I was a parent, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of our next little kind of segue into our second top headline, so-called, in connection with this teenagers rule the world, is I don't know how I would be able to manage that. And I'm not a parent. Shayna, you're a parent, and your Max is not old enough to be playing these games, but it's not far enough. Oh, he is.
Yeah. I mean, he's 5.5, but he plays games, just not Fortnite yet. But you just have to put some
parental controls.
He can't just freely click on something. He can't even read yet. So it's like, I can't trust him to click on something and buy, add-ons to a game. But I've parental control over it. So if he wants something, I sometimes will be like, okay, you can do that add-on. But every game does that now. Every game does the add-in purchase.
It's crazy. I mean, Epic, I'm just going back to the deadline. Epic Games indicated Epic booked more than $9 billion in revenue from the game, Fortnite, in 2018 and 19, just from that one game. This is not the only game they make. So it's unbelievable, but it shows the power of that market. See, and this is tricky because we of course are going to be coming at the news here from a screenwriting standpoint. I will never tell a writer, try to write something because you're going to make money off of it or because there's a bigger audience there. I think a huge part of what we should be noticing about this, other than the amazing, huge donation that Epic and Microsoft is making to the relief efforts, which is, that's really should be the focus. But going into the idea of marketing, we need to be aware of our audience. Who is this screenplay for? If it is supposed to be for a younger audience, then you need to feed that audience what they expect, which then means you need to know everything there is to know about that audience. And this is whether it's for teenagers or grown adults watching something like The Power of the Dog. You have to understand what the audience wants. And this is why it's important to be reading these news articles, because even though this is a pretty happy news article and just showing that there are major relief efforts going for these people in the Ukraine, there are some things you can read between the lines here.
That goes into our second
right
that we're going to reference, which is on the ISA Insider website, how the film and TV industry is starting to really get teens. The reason we pulled that one up is because it's referencing throughout the years the way that television and films has really not defined a generation, but found that thing from a generation and pulling it into the masses or audience appeal. For me growing up, obviously in the 80s and 90s, it was John Hughes. And in this article, it references that also. And currently, the big, huge show is Euphoria, in the way that it shows teenagers in, I guess, true fashion. And it terrifies me to no end. That is absolutely terrifying to me.
It is. It's horrifying. And I have not watched Euphoria. I've seen a few scenes and moments, which part of me is like, I kind of wish I hadn't, because it was shocking, and I don't even think of myself as an old person. But there's always been some form of a glorification of that age range on film in some way. It's making it seem a little bit more exaggerated than it is, but that's what this article is talking about, written by the formidable Jeff York. Jeff has been a part of Creative Screenwriter, and he's hosted podcasts for us for a long time. There's a really excellent article, and he just gives a lot of different examples, but what he's moving into as far as subject matter here is how Hollywood has been treating teenagers on screen in a much more realistic way. I think that's the easiest way to summarize the article. John Hughes in the 80s kind of started that. There's always been a little bit of an exaggeration of it. I think Euphoria is a slight exaggeration of some of that. I'm pretty confident that there are teens, even just in my worldview, who are not living that life.
Right.
They're not. They might think that's cool, and then they'll want to watch it because, wow, these other kids are doing it. But more often than not, I don't think these teenagers are actually living that way. But what are some of the examples in this article that he's giving?
They're talking about John Hughes from the 80s, which was something that actually showed teens having problems, real problems and real issues, and talking about cliques and, and a lot to do with levels of income in families and how that related to life, which I think was a huge deal in the 80s. He talks about when Glee started, how it really put forward actual serious teen issues in a form that, you know, is easily digestible, I guess. And 13 Reasons Why, which was a Netflix series that had a lot of controversy about suicide. They talk about 8th Grade, which is a great movie by
Loved
both.
8th Grade.
Loved that movie. Talk about Lady Bird, and then gets into, you know, currently Booksmart by Olivia Wilde, and then also Riverdale, and currently Euphoria. So what I take from this article personally is that if you are especially an older person, I guess over 30, which to teens is ancient, you should really research and figure out currently what is happening. Don't write towards this trend, write something innovative and new that would speak to somebody on a different level than just your basic sort of flowery. I think there's actually room for both. I think there's room for fantasized, beautiful teenage stories. And then I think there's room for these more reality-based, darker, edgier shows that for a parent, if you look at it that way, it's a way to open up a conversation. I don't think that some of these shows are exactly right for every kid to watch. It honestly depends on their mental state or ability to process. But I think they're great for conversation. I think it's great to be able to see something, and maybe you're going through feelings of depression or anxiety, and you aren't aware that other people feel those same feelings. So it's a great way to open up conversation if you have that ability to talk to somebody, I think.
Totally. I completely agree. I think it's proof as to how and why movies and television can change the world. I mean, if you compare how in the know teenagers were in the 70s versus they are now, just in terms of current events. Now, there was a lot going on in the 70s, so don't get me wrong. But as far as the amount of information kids have at their fingertips, they're learning alongside the adults now, and they expect to be treated like adults. They always have. They've always wanted to be treated like adults. I mean, we have all been teenagers before. Shows like Lady Bird, and all these different examples, it shows that this type of content can shape how teenagers then act and react and think and have empathy, and what do they believe, and what it opens up minds. And I think that's the best part of all these teenage, realistic teenage movies and shows that are out, is that it's putting it front and center for everybody to see and understand, and it's opening up people's minds. And whether you agree or not, I think having a slightly more open mind can't be a bad thing.
Right, the world's going to force you there anyway.
I mean, it kind of segued my brain a little bit into a future segment here that I don't want to go too much into it, but I recently watched Moonshot on HBOMax.
Oh,
It's a romantic comedy set in space. 2 college kids, one of which desperately wants to go to Mars, and this takes place in like 2069. And there's like a research program, and he ends up meeting this girl the night before she's going to go to Mars. And he and this girl, they basically have this wonderful night together, non-sexual, but it's kind of really sweet and magical. And they obviously really like each other. And he's like, now I really have to go to Mars. Like, I wanted to go now I really have to go. So he sneaks on a spaceship and he ends up going to Mars. What I noticed about myself is that because of how fun the moments were between the Walt and this girl that he met, the night before she was going to leave, were so fun and meaningful, and I really believe that they hit it off. I wanted those two to fall in love.
mm-hmm.
And I think you and I have both been sort of trained to believe that that's the movie love.
Right.
One night, first time you see somebody, you fall in love with. That doesn't happen. That is not real. And they spoke to that in the movie. He doesn't end up with that girl. And the one person that he does, end up with tells Walt, like, you met her for one night. So it was like bringing normalcy into a completely ridiculous situation. But even just little things like that shows that it's speaking in terms of reality to younger people.
Well, they did that in Frozen too, where the whole Disney idea of like, oh, you fall in love with a prince in one day and then it's happily ever after. They kind of made fun of that in Frozen, where she's like, you just met him, but it's love. No, it's not. You just met him. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know anything about him. It's great. It's actually a great moment for kids too, of just like, what?
Totally. Yeah,
Kind of
and you're seeing so many examples of how a woman does not need a man by the end of the movie, and we've been shaped to be thinking that way. I mean, every single Hallmark movie ends that way.
On that same note, I watched The Girl from Plainville on Hulu, which is the Elle Fanning. She stars in, it's the sort of true crime scripted version of the girl who was sent to jail basically for texting her boyfriend repeatedly over and over and over before he committed suicide.
Oh yes.
And him to do that. And so it was, an unprecedented case in terms of like, is it murder? Was she an accessory to murder? Was it suicide? Highly disturbing. I know that it's somewhat fictionalized in terms of adding some elements, but then I watched the documentary right after I watched the first episode about it, just to sort of check. And this is all coming back to what I was talking about, mental health, in terms of if your kid is watching something like this, they need an outlet to talk about it. The girl, Michelle, she was actually obsessed with Glee, and Leah Michelle's character, after Finn from the show, who was played by Corey Monteith, died. In her mind, it was glamorized that when your boyfriend dies, all this attention is put on you. And so they're commenting on this whole thing of, she already had mental health issues, and then she's glamorizing, well, maybe in order to be popular or to be liked, something has to happen to me. I know, it's absolutely terrifying. So that's why I was talking about earlier of, it's great to start conversations, but they have to have the ability to have a conversation or talk about it or work on it with a therapist or something, because if you just show something like this to a kid, they don't know what to do with it. And if they already have issues, it's like, so it's just a whole nother talk about mental health and awareness in that way.
Artwork in general starts a conversation. That was the whole point of someone painting a picture in the first place.
Yeah.
Even though those aren't, flashy news headlines, this is the way that the industry is moving. It is kind of a flashy headline that Fortnite raises $144 million for Ukraine relief. Let's move over to this week in ISA Insider, even though we've kind of already referenced some things in ISA Insider.
Yeah, maybe we can touch base on a couple articles that we saw that you can go check out yourself on ISA Insider. One of those is written by yours truly, Max Tim, writing, appreciating your script. That is a good one. I think that we all need to check ourselves in that respect. If you're not loving it, don't be writing it.
But it's also finding ways to appreciate it, and then reasons to appreciate it. It's kind of like you're backing up your own naive confidence at first. Like, we come in naively confident, greatest idea ever, but then you have to prove yourself that it is. That's not so easy.
This sucks. And then by the end, you come back around to like, okay, this is good. This is great.
Yeah, I could go on and on in terms of, that article itself. I think you should read it. I'm talking primarily about the moments and how those moments in your script are, it's the DNA of your project, and you need to be brainstorming the moments based on all the other components of your story. But thank you, Shana, for pointing that out.
There's also a great article about limited series. Are they light in their own form of storytelling? And that's a part one of, I think, 2 parts.
Yeah, part 1, Creative Screenwriter Magazine is doing a 2-part series on limited series. It's a really interesting article, and a lot of writers ask us, Shana and I, what is a limited series really? And we're seeing just over the past few years, from True Detective on up to White Lotus, and even really further back. I mean, they were called mini series way back when. There's really no defined amount of time. Moon Knight is only going to be 6 episodes. That's usually the shortest amount, I would think. You might see a 4 or 5 episode.
I think there have been a few that are 3 or 4. I just can't think of it
There
off the
could
top
be.
of my head right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the problem. I can't think of any. You're probably right, though. I just can't think of it.
But it gets to that point where you watch it and then you're on like 4 and then it's done. You're like, wait, it's supposed to be like, how? You never know. So it's sort of like now the Wild West, where if you're watching an actual series, okay, if it was on a network, ABC or something, has 20 something, or, no, it's 6. No, it's 8. No, this season it's 4. You're like,
Yeah.
you get to
Yeah.
what's happening? I need to know.
I mean, there are some really interesting points that the writer makes here. The person says, well, they're referencing another writer talking about limited series, but it says the story arc in a limited series is a far more challenging thing than in a feature film because there are multiple story arcs. And so there's a lot more development you have to do, and you have more than just one character you're following like you usually do in a movie. And at the same time, though, that's, I think, why we love limited series, because basically it's a movie stretched out over 6+ hours and maybe 2 months. Like it's an event that you get ready for on a regular basis, and you can just be like, cool, I just watch this long form movie and I can really fall in love with the characters a lot more.
Yeah, Queen's Gambit was written as a film, and it took a very, very, very long time in various different forms of development with very famous people. And then once they found their sweet spot when it became a limited series, because there was that ability to do that. And it opened it up so much more to interesting storytelling versus more of a contained, smaller story in a film.
And you're able to end the story. Like they have a knowing that by the end of this episode, the story ends. And we're not necessarily going to continue into the following season. Like The Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorites. I just thought it was fantastic. Did you see it?
I did not see it.
Oh man, I mean, I love ghost stories anyway, but it was just wonderful because it felt like an event. Like, okay, here's my October Halloween scary movie, but I'm going to watch it over the course of 4 or 5 nights because I can just binge it. And then you just fall in love with all these characters. And then the story itself can then become formed because of the limited series format, meaning you have a large family, which then means a large cast, which we can spend time with and see how they're all basically affected by Hill House. It's tricky to say this is where the industry is going because it's already been going in this direction for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because I think there's so much room for a limited series. And before there was so much pressure on, you have to make sure that your series can last for 5 seasons. So you get to those 100 episodes so that you make this mark, so you get in syndication, so you make the bucks. And now with limited series, it's an easier way to get a star attached because it's a smaller commitment than an actual long investment of a series. And for me, there was this wonderful show, that Midnight Mass. Did you see Midnight Mass?
Yes, it's the same person. The same Mike Flanagan who did Haunting of Hill House. That was another like section of the limited series. Like he has all these books he's writing.
Amazing. And it had a beginning and an end. And that was it. And I mean, they could probably do a sequel. I mean, they left it open, but yeah, just it's great because it's like watching a movie, but you get to extend it out and really like learn about different characters and different storylines and then be done and move on.
Yeah, and there's an end to it. It's just like a book. It's right like reading a novel. It's going to take you maybe a week to finish a novel if you have the time to read, but there's an end coming. And so it's just
dreading the end. The end is coming. Oh no.
Right. You don't need to come up with a series idea now that needs 100+ episodes. Right. If you can come up with a sitcom that gives you 100+ episodes, you can retire for the rest of your career because it's unbelievable. But it's a different format now in terms of TV because there is so much available to viewers and audiences. And so the streamers don't necessarily need a commitment of 3, 4, 5 seasons. They can get away with a successful show for 2 seasons, and then maybe they'll extend it. And that's kind of what Stranger Things really was. They were going to go a season and maybe 2, and then suddenly it just blew up, and they're like, we got to keep going, which can be dangerous. It's one thing the article was saying is that you might have to kind of jump the shark or do something that just feels different from the DNA of the show. That's the problem with some of those long form series.
Yeah, that's what I feel about The Great, which is another Elle Fanning show, which is the first season was amazing. And I think they only meant it to be 1. And then it became so popular that they were, we got to keep going. And then I watched the second one. I was like, It didn't have that same storyline that worked. It was definitely like a continuation. You were like, okay,
yeah,
it's fun. It just didn't have the same magic.
No, I mean, imagine if they tried to do multiple seasons of the Queen Gambit.
I think they are doing another season of Queen's Gambit.
Really?
I think they are.
I should do more research before I
Don't fool me.
record my.
I feel like it's in the works. Yeah, it's like, do you really need to do that? I understand you want to, but we're all pretty satisfied with that. So
Yeah,
I don't know, but
Yeah.
okay.
I am up to date on Upload. That's an Amazon show. It's fantastic. I'm all about the comedies right now. It's
Yeah.
half-hour comedy. Just, I love it. Everything about it is just so much fun. Because of you, Shayna, I started watching Minx, and wow, the full frontal nudity. But I was warned. But what I'm going to do a Max Reacts video on I think it's 6 episodes so far for Minx. And I released my first Max Reacts video. It's on YouTube on our ISA channel. I did a reaction to video to the Atom Project, but I think my Minx reaction video is just going to be talking about how much I have now fallen in love with Ophelia Lovabond. She plays, she plays the lead, Joyce. She is so good.
Yeah.
And she's been working for a long time. So for me to say, I don't know where this actor came from is really naive of me to say that, but I hadn't seen her in anything before, and she just nails every moment. And so I think my entire reaction video is just going to be talking about how much she needs to be in everything.
Right. Definite breakout role. Amazing. I really like Minx also. Like I mentioned earlier, I started watching The Girl from Plainville. And then I started watching Yellowstone because I felt like I needed to know what it was. And honestly, it's like Game of Thrones out in the wild, out in the West. It honestly feels like where you're like, geez, I didn't know there was so much drama happening out there. I'm only like 4 episodes in, honestly, in season 1. It's complicated. I like it. I think that there's some moments that are a little cheesy. Honestly, I think the dialogue, maybe it finds its rhythm, maybe in the 2nd season. But the 1st season, there were some moments where there's like monologues, and I'm like, it just was kind of cheesy to me. But I totally understand where people are obsessed with Yellowstone. I totally get it. And I'm going to keep watching. It's just one of those, it's kind of like Succession meets Game of Thrones put out in the West.
In Montana on a 2,000-acre farm or something. Yeah, I've heard all the writers.
2,000 acres isn't that much. Their property or their land is like the size of Rhode Island.
Oh.
In Montana.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. I was just throwing out a large number. I don't.
That's not that much.
Okay. I live on maybe less than a quarter of an acre. So I guess that probably work, 2,000 acres. No, all the writers I work with say, you got to watch Yellowstone. It's fantastic. You got to get past the first episode, then it really starts to take off. My parents really liked it, but then they liked 1883 even more, which is kind of like a prequel, so-called, but this Taylor Sheridan guy is just awesome. He can pretty much write his own checks.
I would like to see 1883 too. I'll see that next. I'm going to try to get through the 1st season. But yeah, it's a cool show. It's very interesting. Has lots of layers and lots of amazing meaty characters. So I totally understand why an actor would want to do that show also. I
do want to remind everybody one last time, check out the Max Reacts video on YouTube. First one I've ever put out. I've never done like a video blog series before, so hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let's talk first about some of the questions that popped up on Twitter that I thought were really interesting. We can all answer these ourselves because they're really kind of open-ended, fun questions. The first one though, Shayna, I want to direct to you because you have direct experience with this. How do you juggle writing and work and family?
Very poorly. How do I juggle? I try to give myself chunks of time, and I try to leave the house to do that work. Yeah, it's just a balance that has to be reshifted all the time. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. It's very hard. You just have to find a way that works for you, so that for me, it works to compartmentalize in a chunk of a couple of hours and just focus on that, and then not try. I'm not one of those people who can just do like 15 minutes and then come back, and I have to create a bubble.
I think that's key. I can't really speak to how to juggle family because I'm not a parent, but I do think it's key to know what kind of writer you are. How do you get into your flow? How long does it take you to get into your flow? And then do you need some level of discipline? Obviously we do, but for me, kind of like what it sounds like what you're saying, Shayna, is that for my creative sessions, whether I'm writing a script, a book, or if I'm creating material for the ISA, I can't have something else scheduled after it, meaning like if I have an hour and then I know I have a 2:00, if I'm starting at 1:00 and I know I have a 2:00 call, it's very difficult for me to be creative in just that hour. I can maybe make some notes and think about it a little bit, but full on writing, I need the open-endedness of not like, oh, I have that time frame, I have to stop there because I'll feel rushed, like I have to get things squeezed in there. That's just me though. Some people need that, where they're like, nope, I'm going to do this and this and this between this amount of time, and that's great. But that just comes from practice.
Yeah, I used to be like that, where I needed more open-ended time, but I had to reshift my brain and how I worked, and just understand that, okay, I have this amount of time, and if I don't get accomplished what I need, even if I'm forcing myself, I just had to reprogram myself. You know, I used to be like you, but
Well, and
luxury.
that is a luxury to have, but at the same time, I should try to shift into that mode where it's like, well, I have this amount of time, because in the future, you know, if and when I do get busier with things, God forbid I get married and have children, I am going to have to be able to work that way. You know,
God forbid, don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, what are you going to do when Max is like in school all day long?
Right. Well, comment below and tell us how you guys juggle whatever it is going on in your life with your writing.
Yeah.
The next ones are fun questions, and they're kind of in the same family. So what's a TV show intro that you would never skip?
Yeah, for me, it was easily Game of Thrones, because they threw little pieces in there into what section of the map we're going to be focusing this episode on. And so I was purposely trying to watch for story reasons. But the fun ones are like the Cheers intro, because I just love the song.
I was going to say Game of Thrones. That was the one we always just watched it because it kind of got you in the mood for the epicness of the show. And Golden Girls. I mean, you can't watch Golden Girls without the song, the beginning. You just can't.
Right. God, the 80s had such great theme songs. All of them were like Family Ties theme song was great. Yeah.
Great intro, because it was like the part in it that you wanted.
Which one was?
90210.
Oh, yeah.
Game of Thrones is definitely the more current one that I would say, like, yep, gotta watch that intro. Whatever your favorite intros are, put it in the comments, because I do kind of want to see if there's like a running ranking, you know, some of the shows that everybody loves. Yeah, let's get some nostalgia in there, like Facts of Life or something, you know. You take the good, you take the bad. And then the second question was kind of in that same family of, what's a show, and this was on Twitter, we read this on Twitter. What's a show you wish you could erase from your memory for the sole purpose of being able to watch it brand new with fresh eyes? For me, it's Game of Thrones again. That was my first thought. However, I did go to Stranger Things quickly in my head. Yeah. Just because it was so much fun. I also think for me, Battlestar Galactica. Ooh. Oh God, that was so great. Just the surprises that came, and like the twists and turns, man, to go back and just watch that again from the beginning, man, that'd be great. To say I was pleasantly surprised with Battlestar Galactica is a huge understatement. I remember I was working, it was one of my first jobs in the industry. Across the hall from me, I was working as an assistant at like some distribution company. Across the hall from me was Dark Horse Entertainment. And it was a one-person office because they had other offices elsewhere. And the executive that worked over there was this really cool guy. I'm still friends with him. And we kind of had a share of love for just sort of geek culture. And he walked into the office and put down the full DVD set of Battlestar Galactica. And he said, "You have to watch this." I'm like, I'm not that big of a space opera kind of, Star Trek fan. I kind of like Star Wars. And he's like, no. This is above and beyond. You have no idea. You don't even have to like science fiction. And he was dead on. So anybody who's not watched Battlestar Galactica, like you're saying, Jana, I'm jealous because you get to watch it for the first time. I mean, just epic. And there is Ronald Moore. There's some episodes written by him. He currently does Outlander that I just was like, I'm not worthy. Like, God, just to write like that, to just, oh my goodness, just amazing. Yeah, there are some writers out there in the world that you read their work and you just have to, it's either I'm not worthy or I just need to stop writing because I'm never going to be able to, throw it out there. I'm done. Yeah, can't let your brain go there. Okay, lastly, the Nick writing program. It's amazing. We love the people there.
The submissions are not open. They just recently chose their 10 participants in February. And the reason we're bringing this up, obviously, it's a little bit of our kind of, deadline wrap up, so-called, because that one will be opening in the summer in terms of the next round of submissions. And the reason we're bringing it up is because so many people, so many writers, when we tell them you should apply to the Nick Writing Program because it's free, but also because it's such a great opportunity, they don't always get a lot of submissions. So you have a decent shot at getting noticed. And they're like, oh, I don't want to write for animation.
Or kids.
Or kids, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what do you say to that, Shana?
Well, I think that the great thing about the Nickelodeon writing program is that there are shows that you can write your samples that aren't kids shows. I think that if you can work your muscle of writing something for Nickelodeon's writing program, and you should check out this giant list of shows, you'd be surprised some of the new shows that they've added on there. They're wonderful. It's a way in, so why not try for it? I mean, if you can write for adults, you can write for a younger set, you can write for parents who have kids. Like, it's opened up. It's not just for like SpongeBob SquarePants. There's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of kids out there. So it's a great, even if your end goal is to not write for kids, it's a great way in, and it actually can propel you in whatever direction you want to go.
And you won't necessarily get pigeonholed in terms of, oh, it's the only part of the industry I can write in. And also, it's a job.
Yeah.
You actually have a regular writing staff job. You get paid to do that, to write on a really fun show for an amazing company.
Nickelodeon's so nice.
Yeah. It's Nickelodeon. I mean, it's Nickelodeon. Come on, you'd be writing on a Nickelodeon show. It's important to note most of the shows that are accepted in terms of, because you're going to write a spec and submit the spec of a show, and then they're going to judge you on that particular spec plus other application, parameters. But most of the shows are live action that they're going to be reviewing. Ghosts, Grownish, How I Met Your Father, Mythic Quest, Young Sheldon, What We Do in the Shadows, The New Wonder Years. Most of them, I would say 80% of them are live action shows. So if you can show that you can write for a live action show, then they're going to be looking for voice. They're going to be looking for the type of writer per the type of comedy, the situations, and then place you within a particular show that they're then producing.
They also put Abbott Elementary on that list. And if you haven't seen that show, it's sort of like The Office, but set in a grade school, an elementary school that is sort of fighting for funding for its programs. And it's really funny, and it's for adults, but there's kids in it too. So that's a great one to write a spec. Just so much to work with.
Right. Then that's a really good point. There's so much to work with, because you want to try to pick a show where you can show off the multiple voices that you have, your handling of storylines, how you can, take pieces of the A, B, and C and put them into an episode. That's ultimately what executives are looking for. Do they have a handle on how to write a half-hour show? Plus, Abbott Elementary is new, and so there are probably not a lot of specs going around town for that particular show.
And there's not multiple seasons, so you don't have to watch the entire series or multiple, seasons of a show, so that you don't copy an episode. Or there's a lot of fresh ideas that can come out of that one season, even though they are doing a second season. So yeah, and from those shows you just mentioned, that's so many different genres that you can choose from. I mean, like What We Do in the Shadows to Abbott Elementary to Ghost to Grownish. I mean, so
many options. The studio fellowship and writing programs are, I think, an underutilized resource for screenwriters, and so you need to be aware. Nick Writing Program is probably one of the best. They've been going on for a long time, and they're going to continue going. And I think the more options you can find for yourself to get material noticed, the better. Let's go to our fifth and final segment here.
When I need a dose of good news, I go to Instagram. These people are also on TikTok, and I'm sure that for the younger people, you'll go to TikTok and find these people, but I choose Instagram. And I wanted to give a shout out to 3 pages on Instagram, 3 people who are just doing amazing acts of kindness in the world. And all three of them are gaining a lot of popularity very quickly. So if you don't know about these people, you should check them out because it's amazing. So the first one is Charlie Rocket and his company, Dream Machine Foundation. So he's at Charlie and it's Dream Machine USA on Instagram. Basically what they do is they tour around America and they try to make dreams come true. I mean, amazing. Currently they are working with this wonderful man named Vincent who wants to be a WWE wrestler. Vincent also happens to have Down syndrome and he knows everything about wrestling. So they set up this giant wrestling event for him in Florida and we're raising money for Down syndrome. It was amazing. He just went to WrestleMania. I mean, these are things you can follow on Charlie's Instagram, but I mean, just heartwarming. The second one is in that same vein. It's this guy named Jimmy Darts. And he basically just goes around and does kindness acts where he goes up to somebody and asks them to help him. Like, do you have $1 to spare? Do you have any food? And then the first person who gives him something, he goes, you can have this back. And then he gives them $500. And they're usually people who very much need $500 and are very thankful. And it's generally the people who have nothing to give. And then when they receive, they're like, no. But it's, again, completely heartwarming. And then the third one is more international based. Murphy's Life. They're currently in Venezuela. What they do is they take donations and then they build homes and businesses for people who are in poverty or very low income areas. And they're actually just giving them a sustainable income and a business and fixing up their homes so that they're able to live a better life than what they had before. And I mean, if you just need a dose of like, phew, thank you, world. The world is a good place and people are wonderful and kind, then check out those three pages. I look at them daily and they warm my heart and I'm often in tears. I show them to my son. And it's just a good way to sort of remember that there's goodness in the world.
There's a lot of it. And I know that if I were to win the lottery, like a $200 million jackpot, I would absolutely do something like that.
Yeah.
Especially the Charlie Rocket and Dream Machine USA, and just go around and, hey, what do you want to do? And let's go do it. It just sounds like a ton of fun, whether or not I would broadcast it on Instagram, whatever. I think it's fantastic that they're doing this. I did want to add Good News Movement as a profile I followed. I think that's a pretty well-known one. And it's just fun, cute little stories as you see, puts a smile on your face in the morning when you're drinking coffee.
Yep, agreed.
That is the news for this week, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. A huge shout out and thank you to Fortnite and Microsoft Xbox for putting 144 million toward the relief in Ukraine. I think that's a big deal.
Leave us your comments below. What do you want us to talk about? Put your questions, anything like that. Email us. Let us know how we're doing.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you next week.